Hi, welcome to APX Color Tutorials. This is our very first tutorial. It's a very exciting tutorial, and I wanted to teach you guys a brand new method about how to move a displacement map on a moving image, so to speak, a video. So if you have somebody who's shaking their shirts, or if you have a flag, for example, that you want to position your logo over, this tutorial will show you how to apply those effects without using any external filters. So since this is the first tutorial, I just wanted to give a quick background. I'm a photo studio retouching manager for the color correction department of a small photo studio where we process school images, but I also work as a filmmaker. I've directed short films, I've worked as editor, and as well as a color corrector for international distributed feature film. I know there are hundreds of tutorials on displacement maps out there on the internet. Part of what makes this tutorial unique is the application of Photoshop, integrating it with After Effects to get more specific effects, and perhaps even easier in some cases than just using After Effects by itself. In trying to search how I could apply this method to a flag or to some kind of moving object, I wasn't able to find any tutorials out there. Now, perhaps there are some, but I personally couldn't find it. So I went ahead and just kind of formulated my own strategy, my own methodology as to how to do this without a filter. So that's what we're gonna be showcasing in this tutorial. Very exciting. It's something that you can also apply in projects to possibly make money. If you need to put, let's say, an emblem and a flag for a car dealership or for whatever client you have. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so if you look over here on the screen, you see that I have both Photoshop and After Effects open. And something else that you're gonna wanna have is you're gonna have to have your background image, whether it's some kind of shirt waving or a flag, which is what we're gonna be using for the sake of this tutorial. Now, there is a way, I believe, to track the subject and get this effect on a kind of like a moving subject, but that actually takes a lot more steps and it's a little bit more advanced with some 3D tracking techniques. So for now, we're just going to be learning how to do this for a still image. I'll be applying the moving subject methodology to a more advanced tutorial in the near future. So organization, very key. So I'm going to go ahead and start a brand new folder, and we're going to call this folder flag, just to make it simple. And inside the folder, I'm actually going to start pre-organizing this a little bit by adding one folder that's going to be the placeholder for our displacement file, and we're going to do another one called flag in. And this is basically where we're going to be storing all the JPEGs. The idea of this tutorial is to break the video file into thousands of images and then automate a process that can then batch those images and then recompile them into a video file. So this flag in is where we're going to be storing all the JPEGs. And so the first step is to essentially just bring our video file, whatever it is that you're using, into After Effects. This is a good time, if your video file is blurry, if there's anything wrong with it, this is a good time to perhaps maybe apply a grain filter if you would like. So let's just do one just for the sake of this tutorial. I don't think we need it, but just to showcase. So I went and dragged the remove grain. Just want to make sure we put final output. Yeah, that looks pretty good to me. So now that I put my endpoint over here, just go ahead and send this to render queue, and then render queue, click on the lossless and go ahead and on format, choose the format that is going to be most appropriate for you. Now, for the sake of this tutorial, we're going to just go ahead and stick with the JPEG sequence, but if you want to do PNG for a client, go ahead and do so. It's going to be a little bit more graphic and memory intensive. So we're going to just use JPEGs. Go ahead and render that. Now make sure that you put the folder in the right place. So I'm going to go inside flag in and just go ahead and dump that in there. Now what happens is, if you were to have done this with Premiere, then it would just export the JPEGs right straight to that folder. But After Effects works a little bit differently, that when you export JPEGs, it creates its own folder. So what you're actually going to have when we render it, let me show you what I'm talking about, is you're going to have flag, then you're going to have flag in, and then you can have another folder. So it's up to you if you want to keep that folder, or when it's all said and done, if you want to dump it out. But while it's rendering this, we can actually start automating our process. So let's take any one of these JPEGs and let's go ahead and put it in Photoshop. And we'll go ahead and put this guy down here and deal mostly with Photoshop now. Okay, so this next step is all about automating this displacement map. Now this is a little bit tricky. There are a few steps that you have to take. I noticed that if you batch it in one particular way, then it doesn't really use new displacement maps. It's as if it's taking a shortcut and using the same displacement map for every single JPEG. So just make sure that you follow this tutorial to the T, and hopefully you'll get the result that you're looking for. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and create a new action. If you never created actions before, it's just a way to automate the program to create the same behaviors that you're creating. So whatever it is that we create for an action, it has to be a behavior that's general enough that it can be applied to the next image and so forth, given however many images you have. So we're gonna create a new action and we're gonna call this flag. And the first step is we wanna click on the channels and then go ahead and scroll through the color channels to see which one has the most contrast. Now in this particular case, you see that all of the channels seem to be equal, which probably means that this was computer generated. So we're just go ahead and choose any of these channels, it doesn't matter. Right click on it and then click duplicate channel. And it's very important that when you duplicate the channel that you pick a new document. And the whole idea of picking a new document, and go ahead and call this displacement. Don't worry about where it saves because we're going to do our own manual saving. So the idea of creating a new document is that we want to preserve the original name comp006 so that as the files are compiling in the end, the name doesn't resave into itself essentially. So over here we want to go ahead and save, or actually before we save, let's go ahead and add a little bit of contrast. And displacement maps do really well when you have high contrasty black and white images. So lucky for me, my image is already black and white. Okay, so go ahead and save this channel as, we're gonna call it displacement PSD. Just make sure you have the right folder. Okay, so after you have your displacement map, just make sure you close it. Yes, we will save that. And then make sure that the closed was recorded in your action. That's very important. So going back to our initial JPEG 006, we want to go ahead and place our object now, whatever object you want to use. Now I'm going to use the logo for, make sure your RGB channel is red. There we go. So I'm using the logo for my channel. It's it's kind of like a UFO channel. If you haven't noticed, we have about 17,000 subscribers. So if you guys want to check it out, definitely check it out on YouTube. All right, so there it is, Second Earth. And so the steps from here on are going to be very familiar. They're going to be similar to the natural displacement methods that you've probably learned before that you do for just still images. So we're going to go ahead and go to select. Oh, another step I almost forgot is you have to rasterize this image because we're going to be distorting it. So go ahead and rasterize this file, and you guys can't see it in the screen, but rasterize is just a few clicks down here. So after we rasterize the file, go to filter, we want to go to distort and displace. For the sake of this example, 10:10 should work out just fine. And go ahead and take your displacement map from the displacement folder, and there you guys have it. So next we want to go to the layer and set it to perhaps overlay. And I'm gonna make another copy of this, decrease it to about 30%. I'm gonna make a copy of the background, overlay it, put it in the very front, and put it maybe like a multiply filter. So that's starting to look actually pretty good. I'm gonna decrease the multiply just a little bit. And so from here on, you can kind of play with it. Sometimes what I like to do is I like to put a normal layer in the bottom. It kind of gives me a little bit more color on the image. So this is actually open to interpretation. You guys can kind of play around with the filters and figure out which looks best for the effect that you're looking for. But for a flag-like effect, I'm pretty happy with that. I think that looks pretty good. Now, there might be some issues with aliasing, depending on how hard your edges or how soft your edges are. There are some workarounds to this. One way you can do is, instead of putting multiply, you can try to lighten it, and that will soften, and that might soften a little bit. You can try to soften the edges in After Effects, but that can be a little bit intensive. Basically, the best way to prevent this from happening is just make sure that your original image is as smooth as possible, and that there's no black hard edges that could create this aliasing effect. So let's just go back to multiply, because I do like that look better. Okay, so I gotta say, I'm feeling pretty happy with this. So all we have to do now is go ahead and save the image. Oh, actually, before you save it, very important, flatten the image. You want to flatten the image because you don't want the program to try to save copies of the image because there are multiple layers, or try to save Photoshop. You want it to just think of it as a single layer JPEG. So let's go ahead and save this. And so we already have a flag in folder. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a new folder called flag out, and save that. We're actually almost done with this. So just go ahead and stop the action, and we have everything recorded. Now here's the thing, if you end up undoing some action that you're doing, like if you make a mistake and you push undo, oftentimes that might screw up your action. So when you are in the process of creating the action, just make sure that everything is as smooth as you can make it without having to go backwards on your step. I think the After Effects did finish our file, so we have everything in there. So from now on, it's really just a matter of batching what we've just created. So we're gonna go over here, and let's go ahead and close this image for now. And let's go File, Automate, Batch. Go ahead and choose the folders that so we want to go flag in, comp 1. Make sure you double click on the folder so you're in comp and not in the flag folder. And then we want to have it sent to flag out. Now keep this override action open, because look, if you overwrite, it says here, when this option is on, files will be saved to the destination folder only by save as. We could technically have this checked on, but we would also have to have created a new one that would have closed the file, which we didn't do. So in this case, we're just gonna leave it open. And yeah, let's see if it works out. Okay, so it looks like it's working. I'm not 100% sure if the images are different, so let's test them out. Okay, we got one there. Yeah, that's looking good. You can see that the yellow is changing the contour. So depending on how fast your computer is, this method might take like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It all depends. So yeah, so we'll take a coffee break. Something else that I should mention that I forgot to mention is that I thought that files looked pretty good, so I didn't care about putting extra grain filters or extra noise filters. But definitely once you blend everything in, a good option is to look to see if there's any softening filters you can apply on Photoshop as a last step before you save it, just to try to get the image to blend a little bit better without having any kind of aliasing or any kind of effects that will deter the look of your project. Okay, so we're back. So this next step, you guys probably already guessed, it's basically taking After Effects and make sure that when you have After Effects that your composition settings, so we're gonna have to go back to composition settings, is exactly the same, because we're essentially overlaying a whole bunch of JPEGs almost like you would with a time lapse. And if this were to be 23.97, then your file might be a little bit longer than you had anticipated. So we do have the folder over here. So let's go ahead and just simply push Apple Import. We'll go to flag out, and make sure that you import the very first file. Now, if you have a sequence of files in a single folder and you just import the first file, then what ends up happening is that it will import all of the files as if it's a time lapse. So if we just drop it to our track, because we got the frame rate and the composition correct, the video file and image sequence are the same exact size, as you notice. So just make sure that you put the image on top, and there it is, guys. Let's take a look, preview it real quick. So yeah, that's looking pretty good. Now, this is an opportunity to do one extra step. So if you're not satisfied with this, if you think it looks a little too loosey-goosey, go ahead and use that video file that you have. Go ahead and copy it, and you can use it as like an extra layer. So let's say you say, oh, that wasn't dark enough, so I want to put like another multiply effect. So you just want to go to transform and then maybe lower the opacity a little bit, and then right click. So just make sure you pick the appropriate blending mode that, you know, in this case, well, let's just try multiply real quick to see if it does anything to our file. So here is with the video file. Yeah, you know, I kind of like it. It's giving it a little bit more depth and kind of sinking the image more into the map. So yeah, let's do that. Let's keep that, and let's export this and see what it looks like. Oh, one other step is you might want to give a little frame blending. Now, from my own personal tests, I didn't notice a huge difference, simply because there aren't any frames in between that would distort this process. But just go ahead and frame blend it. Do whatever seems right to you. I'm going to try frame mix. And like I said, I've done tests on both of them, and I can notice a difference between frame mix and pixel motion. So just do whatever you're comfortable with. And yeah, so the last step is obviously just to export this. Add to render queue. I'm going to export this as, now for clients, obviously you want to export it as lawless, but I'm just going to do QuickTime. Should be good enough, for example. Okay, so we'll take another export coffee break. Okay, we are back. So now this is finished. Let's go ahead and take a look at the final version. There it is, guys. That is our final result. And you know, to be honest with you, I think it looks pretty good. I think that if I were to do this again, I might have blended it, tried to blend it a little bit more seamless, where the object that's being overlaid to the flag looks a little bit more like as if it was stitched into the flag. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. This is something that you can definitely apply to all kinds of different scenarios. And the reason why I want you guys to use Photoshop and After Effects is because this type of methodology that we're utilizing, by applying Photoshop and automating a process to then use this for hundreds, if not thousands of other stills, this is a process that can be used for many applications, not just displacement. So this is just the beginning. Hopefully in the next tutorial, we'll try to advance this method and create this for moving subjects by essentially 3D tracking them. Thank you so much for joining us in our very first tutorial of APX Color Tutorial. I hope to see you guys next time. This is Felipe Osorio, signing out.